What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Mark, we were just talking offline. I said, I've been getting a lot of slack from the Bitcoin community in regards to I've said this, and it's funny. I'm even being honest and transparent of I just don't understand it, and people are coming at me saying that's my shtick, that I don't understand it. I'm like, no, I'm being really honest. I don't get it, and people are like, this is the way. I've gotten you shit coiners are gonna get what you deserve, and I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, I'm just asking questions of trying to understand it, and this is the feedback that I get. I don't know. I still don't get it.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike.
Yeah, they've just been, indoctrinated just the same way people you see still riding around with a mask on by themselves in the car, everything they said about Bitcoin, this is against the central banks and all this stuff. And it's, first of all, I've been asked if I would do a movie on this whole nonsense of the Federal Reserve and Jekyll Island and all that total propaganda. I said, fine, I'll do it. It's, they don't understand central banks. That's another whole thing with the whole Jekyll Island nonsense. They just don't understand the facts. And Julius Caesar, over 2,000 years ago, said people will believe what they want to believe. And that's basically it. You get all these people, central banks, we should eliminate it. That, really? Do you understand the last time you did that was Andrew Jackson, and you ended up with absolute sovereign defaults and then Great Depression? And you had all these individual banks issuing their own currency. It was a complete mess. They blame the central bank, and that's part of where the Bitcoin comes from. Like all inflation and money and everything like that is all from the Federal Reserve. The bulk of the money supply is debt. I hate to tell them. All right. Back in the 60s, if you had an E-bond and you went to the bank, $100 E-bond, and you said, gee, would you lend me $50 against it? They couldn't. It was illegal. All right. After Bretton Woods fell, all right, debt just simply became money that paid interest. You want to trade gold futures? You can post T-bills. No problem. All right. Everything flipped 180 degrees, and they don't understand this. So they blame the Fed, and that's great for the politicians. Hey, it's not my fault, it's their fault. But they're the ones that spend all this money. They're the ones that create the debt. And then you have $1 trillion a year in interest expenditures. All right. It would be better if the Fed printed the money, then there's no interest. In Japan, the corporates there own debt. China had 10% of our U.S. national debt. So you were talking about, okay, fine, $1 trillion. So we're giving China $100 billion in interest to buy missiles to shoot us, right? I mean, it's much more complicated than people have any clue, and I mean, the Bitcoin crowd was all, oh, this is against central banks, blah, 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 and all the rest of this stuff, as if they are the problem. You know, the problem we have is basically it's political. It's all return to a gold standard, all this. You hear all these crazy theories. Do you understand? In order to do that, you have to change the political system first. How's a Democrat going to say, vote for me and I'll give you a lollipop and a free car? You can't do that anymore. So they would, the whole Democrat, platform would have to completely be eradicated. Politicians don't know how to run anymore. It's vote for me and I'll give you this. And when they do that, then the deficit's got to go up. They create COVID. Oh, okay, fine. Well, we're going to have to bail out people. I mean, it's endless, really. Bitcoin is being used basically, the volume of it, which began, is because it is a money laundering instrument. The Chinese figured that out. That's why the Central Bank of China called in all the Bitcoin people when they figured out you could buy Bitcoin in China and sell it in the United States and got the money out. Then they called everybody to show up. Canadians, they're using Bitcoin for the same reason. Europeans are doing it. It's a great money laundering instrument. It's like gold in the sense that it's the same thing everywhere, but you don't have to physically move it. So, but we know in the programming world that there's no Satoshi or whatever Japanese nonsense. I mean, it was created by a guy in the NSA. Everybody knows there was a white paper on it, and they created it for total government control. It's this is why Europe will probably outlaw Bitcoin and just about everything else because they want to move to their central bank digital currency as soon as October, maybe by January. But they're what's on the drawing board is to cancel all the currency. Why? So they get taxes. They don't want it's total capital control. You can't move money without government permission. Spain just did. You can't take out more than 3,000 euros out of your account without government permission. Cash is the enemy. All right. Bitcoin was a great sales job for government. They got all these people. Oh, this is fantastic. This is against the central banks. Really? You better take a look at who created it. There's no Satoshi. So you get these people that are more into they take it to a religious cult, I think, honestly. Not just that, but you had they call them the gold only crowd, same thing. Oh, gold, gold standard and all that. They don't understand the implications of what they're really saying. And we were on the gold standard. That doesn't eliminate inflation. You can look on my site, there was more inflation and you're on gold. So, assets still go up. Read a book about, the California, gold rush. Rooms were going, for like $200 in gold per night to rent. This is, 1849. Um, I mean, it's you have a business cycle, and what Marx was doing was he was trying to stop the business cycle. Let me take all private, personal assets away from everybody, and that will do it. All right, didn't work. Had Thomas More wrote his Utopia, the world where everybody's equal, and that's what Marx was looking at. Keynes, oh, well, we can manipulate society, raise interest rates, lower interest rates. Sounds nice. It's failed. Um, you know, even when he did that, you know, the U.S. had a balanced budget. We were the biggest borrower in the room. Today, it's the government. So you raise interest rates to stop inflation, you create more. That's what's the problem going on with central banks. Trump and his feud with Powell is absurd. Oh, let's just lower interest rates. Really. Powell understands we're going into war. All right. Okay, fine. He may placate Trump and cut rates in September. You start war, rates are going up. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. Historically, there's never been a period in time when rates go down during war. They don't. There was a big famous feud at the Federal Reserve in 1951. You can look it up. During World War II, the Treasury and the White House instructed the Federal Reserve basically to cap, if the bond market, if rates rose above a certain level, the Fed had to buy it. Then the Korean War was starting, and they wanted them to do the same thing again. The Federal Reserve said, enough is enough. We're not doing this. And that became a big feud between the Federal Reserve and the White House in 1951. So, I mean, if you understand your history, this stuff has been, beaten over the head with a baseball bat so many times. It's pathetic. But understand, you get these people. Oh, we want a gold standard so that money is valuable. It's fixed. Oh, but I want my house to go up and I want to raise. How do you get that? But money buys the same. It doesn't work. It's like I said, Julius Caesar was correct. People believe what they want to believe. Has nothing to do with the truth.
Why do you have to raise interest rates in times of war?
Mainly because you're then buying more supplies, food, stuff like this. You got to pay troops. All of this, it does not produce. Even Sun Tzu basically said there's no evidence of any government ever, benefiting from perpetual war. You look at our national debt, the vast majority of it is for wars. It didn't buy housing for moms and pops and orphans or anything else. It all sounds nice, but you look at it, the amount of money that goes into war. We are still paying interest on World War I, then World War II, Korea War. They never pay it off. So, the cost of World War II, we're now probably, getting close to the point where we're spending more in interest than what the war cost us.
Yeah, I saw that your conversation with Greg Hunter got shared on Zero Hedge, and you were talking about Russia, how that is it. you tell me if I understood it right, because I read the transcript, but that's irreversible at this point. Did you think that when Trump and Putin met that something was going to come out of it?
No. Uh, I warned Washington, actually. I said, look, the problem is not Putin. The problem is Europe. Europe is going. I warned them then, and I still maintain it. And Europe is going to stab Trump in the back. Just recently now, uh, they have instructed Zelensky to start attacking all the oil going into Hungary. Why? Because they want Hungary out. Hungary is the one that has been blocking Ukraine from joining NATO, etc. And has blocked aid to Ukraine, etc. Because these things require consent of everybody. So under Article 7, they tried since 2018, because Hungary's been against also the migrant stuff, and they don't like Orban. So Zelensky just gave him an ultimatum: choose sides. He's deliberately attacking the gas and the oil lines into Hungary to cut off the energy, and they hope that will create a regime change, force the government in Hungary to collapse, and then run into the open arms of the EU, and then they can wage World War III. I mean, this is basically what's going on. I mean, as you know, when they were forming the euro, they came to me, and so I was there at the table. I knew what we're dealing with, and I told them, I said, this is not going to work this way. And I said before, Herman Kohl basically didn't allow the German people to vote to join the euro. So what he did, he took them, and you can look it up. I mean, before he died, he admitted he acted like a dictator. And what he insisted on was there would be no consolidation of the debt, because he knew that Germans would be upset about bailing out Greece and Italy and etc. And I warned him that euro is never going to compete with the dollar. As a fund manager, I've said before, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. I can't with Europe. I still got to make the same decisions as if everybody had their own currency. Do I want German? Do I want Italy? Do I want France? You still got to make all the same decisions. There's no national debt. U.S. debt market is the deepest market in the world. And their failure to create that is a problem. You look at German rates, 30-year rates, they're at record highs. Everybody knows war is coming over there. And as they do, then you don't look, if you don't, when you get into war, you also have uncertainty. If you buy the German bonds, what if they lose? You lose everything. All right. You do not buy debt of the people waging war. You just don't. I mean, you can buy Confederate bonds on eBay. They look very nice, framed up. You can buy a ton of bonds from the 1930s, all defaulted on. And you have to understand one thing. If a company goes bust, all its assets are then thrown into the pot. It's sold off at auction. You get something back. A government goes bust, you get nothing. All right, that's totally unsecured. All right, you can't go down to the National Gallery and start lifting, Picassos. So that's really the major difference. And I wouldn't own any European debt whatsoever at this stage. Zero.
So, what do you envision? I mean, we've talked, a number of times, and we've talked about this. But as we sit here, end of August, 2025. One, first thing that pops into my head: Europe doesn't have the manpower to escalate this with Russia against the Russian army. And correct me if I'm wrong with these statements, I'm posing these as questions. And two, what does a war that Europe would escalate look like? Because I mean, it seems like all these countries internally have their own struggles going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, your second question is that they needed a diversion. It's like, I'm picking your pocket. Oh, look at the bird over there. um, they do have internal problems, and you're looking at civil unrest in most of the major cities.
Martin, did you see that? Not to interrupt, did you see that girl yesterday? I think it was in Scotland with the knife and the axe, a 14-year-old girl that's going around.
No, I didn't see that one.
She got arrested. Later on, they said she got arrested, but an illegal. I don't know if he assaulted her and her friend, and she had. I mean, it was like Braveheart. She had a little axe and a knife, and was like, something like, "Get the fuck away!" I'll have to. I'll have to send it to you to see it. It's all. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you'll find it. But
Look, this is what's going on. I have a friend over there with a 13-year-old daughter. He will not even allow her to walk out, 2 blocks to the bus stop. Things have changed. People are really upset over all of this stuff. That's why AFD in Germany is now number one. They were calling a bunch of Nazis because they didn't want anybody in. Well, now they're number one because they're sick and tired of everybody that came in. Now, to answer your first question, um, I won't say who, but I speak to the core of Europe, not Eastern Europe. I'm talking about the core. And the very derogatory attitude towards the East Europeans. What the hell? They were all communists before, anyhow. They don't give two shits about Ukrainian lives. Almost 1.8 million are now dead. They don't care. If they cared about, human life and peace, you have Boris Johnson hop on a plane when there was a peace deal and said, no, you're not allowed to sign it. You had the Minsk agreement, which would have prevented any kind of a war. You had Merkel come out and said, well, we never really intended to honor it. We were just buying time for Ukraine to build an army. In other words, you've been planning for this war all along. I was speaking to Romania. The government there was instructed by the EU. I'm not even sure if it's out in the press yet. Instructed by the EU that they must take in 100,000 Africans and Middle Easterners. Why? I think you're going to see Europe in a major civil unrest. These people think that they have allowed all these migrants in, and that they'll be able to draft them and send them against Russia. They're not going to fight for these people. I mean, it's more like, there's an example from history even. The Roman Emperor Valens in the 360s, right? Attila the Hun was moving towards Rome, and the Goths were German tribes. So they came and they asked permission to come for safety, to come into the Roman Empire. Valens allowed them to do it. And he also thought, okay, fine, what I'll do, and he basically drafted them, trained them to be military in all Roman tactics, thinking now he was going to double the size of his army, if not triple it, for Attila the Hun. What the Goths do? Oh, thank you very much. They turned around, waged war on him, killed him in battle, and won. All right. That's a lesson from history that Europe had better take notice of. You train these people, they're not going to fight Russia for you. They're going to go, this is pretty good. Okay, thank you very much. And turn on them. But, it's as far as the peace is concerned, I've said on podcasts, but I also, I warned Washington. I said, look, if I'm Putin, I'm not signing anything. Why? Because, first of all, if I sign a peace deal, a ceasefire, Europe's only going to replenish all the arms for Ukraine again. Why would I do that? It's not like they are trustworthy. This is why they didn't even have a seat at the table. And after the Minsk agreement, you all the leaders, France, Germany, they're all there, all agreed with Russia, we're going to have peace. And then they reneged on it. Why would Putin sit down with them again? How many times can you fool somebody?
So what does he do then?
I think largely he understands what's going on. This is not a war with Ukraine. This is a war with NATO. Zelensky takes his orders from NATO, London. I spoke to military. They were initially told just to go to the border to invade Kursk. That order came from MI6. This is why Zelensky will not run for election, because he knows he would lose. I gave the information I had to that he's sending out 50 million a month to secret accounts in UAE, and that's now out all over the place. I had inside info from Ukraine that for the first meeting where you saw Zelensky go to the White House, that was only supposed to be a signing in Kiev. Boris Johnson, I had info, flew to Kiev 3 days in advance, told Zelensky, no, you insist to go to the White House, and embarrass Trump into keeping the money flowing for the war. That's why that first meeting was like a food fight. I sent over that information. I said, he's coming over there. This is to embarrass Trump. That's why they were all had their backs up. They were ready. The media doesn't, cover any of the real stuff. I mean, look, Boris Johnson's, you can even Google that up. He made the front pages of the Norwegian press. He openly came out and said, we are at a proxy war with Russia. He openly stated that UK is at war with Russia. So why would Putin sign anything? I wouldn't. You got to be a fool to do that.
So what does he do then? I mean, just continue this until continue to the parallel on the BRICS side to move towards an alternative currency or an alternative world reserve currency or bipolar or bi-world reserve currency, and then continue to move forward until NATO is dissolved? I mean, what would be the end game for him?
He's got to absolutely defeat Ukraine to driving it to the ground. Personally, if I was him, I would take the U.S. tactic. I would drop the leaflets over Kiev. So, look, you got, 3 days to get out of the city. I'm going to nuke it and just completely wipe it out. We did that to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That's what I would do. I mean, because there is no solution here. As long as, and I've told this to Washington, as long as Zelensky is there in power, there is no shot in hell at any peace. He takes his orders from NATO, and look, he's sending money out because this guy is so hated in Ukraine. I've spoken to, even people there that bluntly put it that if he was on fire, they wouldn't urinate on him until he was dead. They attempted to assassinate him last May, and he fired his Ukrainian bodyguards. He now has MI6 and CIA. He doesn't trust his own Ukrainian people. And why would you? He's kidnapped people, even people with Down syndrome, and sent them to the front line. He's not. What are you fighting for? The Donbass are they're Russians. They've been there for hundreds of years. Khrushchev was born there on the border. His successor, Brezhnev, was born in the Donbass. All right, Stalin, he was from Georgia. The debate in Moscow is who is really Russian. It's the Russian Empire was big. It had a lot of different areas. But Lenin even wrote a letter and said, "Do not let Stalin secede me." It's widely suspected that Stalin poisoned Lenin and his wife. I mean, he was just a ruthless, look, I've had personal experience on both sides. I went to China, saw their communists. I went even behind the Berlin Wall before it fell. There was a difference between a communist, of Russia versus China. Stalin was paranoid. He was worried about what you said to your wife. All right. China had the tall poppy syndrome. They didn't care what you said to your wife. But if you stick your head up and start talking to everybody else, it's going to get cut off. And I know people that grew up in Eastern, Berlin, and they said that they were taught in school that if your parents ever spoke against the state, you were to report them because the state is really your parent. This is the bullshit that Stalin was putting out. I had another friend that when the wall came down, his father went and got his Stasi file and found out everybody he thought was a friend was ratting on him. And he came home and he was punching holes in the walls and pulling out microphones. He said his father would never speak to anybody but family ever again. So it's completely different what Stalin did versus China. And that's why, in my opinion, I think that's why China economically boomed very rapidly, whereas Russia did not. Russia went from communism to oligarchy, whereas China basically didn't do that. But, both are capitalists now. I mean, both have got more, China may have even more billionaires than we have. So it's been interesting to watch over the years. I've been dragged into just about everything from one crisis to another. So I've got to see so many different things.
What do you think? So let's say hypothetically, then Putin, obviously he recognizes what needs to be done to resolve this, and let's say he's hearing this, and the idea of dropping a nuke in Kiev. How would NATO respond to that? Because once you cross that barrier,
well, that's the point. I think that Europeans they don't want war either. And I think you have to do something to raise the level of a threat so that they really see this. Uh, Maybe you just threaten to do that. And then NATO would say, well, you do that, we're going to target Moscow. Okay, fine. Every city in Europe is now targeted. Is this what you want? Putin is everybody that I know that's met him, and even in the Clinton declassified documents that I have, everybody always says the same thing, that he is extremely smart. And his biggest problem that I'm concerned about is that he has laid down so many red lines. You do this, that's it. You do that, and you give long-range missiles, that's it. We do. NATO has crossed every red line he put down. They even invaded Kursk, thinking that will get him to attack. It's a psychological tactic you need. It's called rally around the flag. You always need the enemy to attack you. Then you'll get people to volunteer to fight. It doesn't work the other way around. All right. After Pearl Harbor, everybody wanted to volunteer. All right. You don't get them to volunteer or say, well, I don't like this guy, let's go invade. Yeah. Well, that's your problem. So this is why NATO's been crossing every line that he puts down. The press doesn't help because Putin's come out and said many times, is this what you want? And the press go, oh, he's threatening World War III. No, he's warning you, you asshole. And if he wanted World War III, and Trump knows he does, all right, it's like what they say about a dog. A barking dog doesn't bite. If you really want to do that, you don't warn anybody in advance. You just do it. I mean, that's the military tactic, the surprise attack. You don't say, hey, you do this and this is going to happen. My concern is that you had Zelensky try to assassinate him a couple months ago. He knows what I know. NATO knows what I know. You take out Putin and it does not end the war, it gets worse. Because then you're going to get somebody like Madoff or whatever. And Madoff basically constantly threatens nukes and whatever. You want somebody who's going to be there, who responds emotionally. Oh, we just invaded Kursk. That's it. Okay, buttons pushed. Something. Putin has been extremely restrained because he knows the game. He knows they're trying to get him to attack anything in NATO so they can call him the aggressor, and that launches World War III. That's really what they're doing. And it's called rally around the flag. Look it up. It's a psychological war tactic. And that's what they do. I mean, they need him to attack to get people to rally up. I mean, just look at all the polls in Europe. People do not want drafts. They're against that. I've done podcasts in Netherlands. What would you tell the youth? Should they just leave? I mean, these are the questions I get. So, I mean, that's what I mean. It's I don't see this as a reasonably, solution here. I mean, as you know, we had with staff in Ukraine. We have, in Kiev as well as in Donetsk, both sides. Um, and one from Donetsk even did all the translation for the forecaster that appeared in Russia. Um, so when Putin first went in and there was that column of tanks just outside of Kiev, I'm like, oh shit, I called my staff. I said, you okay? Do we have to get you out of there? No, they're not doing anything. It's just a show of force. He could have taken Kiev. He didn't. All right. That whole column of tanks was just there as a show of force. Putin is more of a historian. And despite all the propaganda, he's distorting. No, he's not distorting history. Ukrainians never had a country. They were like the Kurds from Iraq. That was it. All right. Kiev was the mother city of the Russians. The Rus, that's where they were. Okay. The Mongols invaded in 1240. That's why you still have 15% of the population in Crimea are Tartars, right? They destroyed the city. And then the Rus were dispersed, and then they started up again in Moscow, etc. But so to Putin, Kiev is like to us London, the mother city. That's why he doesn't nuke it, or he doesn't, there's the Golden Gate there. You can look that up. I mean, that was all that's standing left and was reconstructed, but that was all that was standing of the Russian fort there that the Mongols destroyed. So that's a monument, and it's still there. The Ukrainians never had a country. It's just simple as that. The coinage documents Russian coinage, back to the 13th century from that area. All the Russian princes were there. No Ukrainian coinage. So history is what it is. And I mean, they keep trying to rewrite it, whatever, but Crimea is the warm water port for Russia, and it was a strategic, asset. And it was Khrushchev Khrushchev was actually in charge of Kiev after World War II. He's the one that rebuilt the city before he became the head of Russia. All right, so he drew the borders. He gave Crimea and the Donbass for administrative purposes to Kiev. He did that, the same thing. He was always changing borders. He did that in Azerbaijan, etc. And he caused a lot of problems with this. So Ukraine goes, oh, that's our territory. Really? There isn't any Ukrainians there except for a very small minority. All right. And 5 million people from there, Russians, they fled to Russia. Look, this is the Balkans. You look at Czechoslovakia, it's split on ethnic lines. Czech Republic, Slovakia. Ukraine, Yugoslavia, same thing, broke up. You got Montenegro, you got Croatia, you got Serbia. Serbs hate Armenians. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. You can look up, the former, Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck. In 1888, he said, a major war is going to come and engulf Europe, and it's going to come from the Balkans. He was right.
So where do you think, timeline-wise, not that we can predict anything, but how much longer will this go for before there's some type of resolution?
I think the only resolution is going to be on the battlefield. Europe has a choice. If they don't get war, the economy is going to collapse. Um, you're going to have people storming into parliaments with pitchforks. Look, they put in, you had COVID. Then they put in, the climate change. Then they put in the sanctions on Russia. The German economy shrunk. And I'm talking about the number of possible jobs declined by 3%. The only other economy that has actually declined, shrunk, is Japan. Now, you have NATO demanding 5% of GDP to build up for an army. So that's 8%. 8% of the economy. Europe's going into a depression. NATO is nothing more than a neocon retirement home. That's it. They have no purpose in life other than to create war. They should have been shut down when the USSR collapsed and the whole Warsaw Pact collapsed. Instead, what did they do? They kept moving to absorb what was the Warsaw Pact. This is basically it. It's I've seen the internal memos. I've said it before. I was shown the internal memos from NATO, and they were concerned about money was all going to climate change, and they said, how do we remain relevant? And they only remain relevant by saying, oh, Putin wants to invade Europe. Why? It's the same old nonsense from Khrushchev. But Khrushchev was different. That was communism, and we're going to eradicate capitalism. All right. It wasn't a conquest for money or something like that. It was a philosophical difference. Kind of like Middle East, it's, one God against another God. Communism failed. All right. Russia is capitalist. I'm sorry. They have no interest in taking Europe. There's nothing there of any value. Europe has to get its energy from Russia. What is there? Nothing. There's no tangible asset that would benefit Russia whatsoever.
What then, and the United States' role in all this? I know you were talking about Trump wants to remove himself from it. Are they going to be able to?
I've been screaming as loud as I can in Washington. What I was told after the meeting was that Trump had said absolutely no American troops in Ukraine, no boots on the ground. I tend to believe that mainly because I did go to dinner at Mar-a-Lago when he was president the first time in March of 2020. And I heard him at that time say he wanted to get the troops out of Afghanistan, but it was the reason. He said that he was tired of writing letters to their families to say your son died for God and country. And he actually said, what are we doing there? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. What difference are we going to make? And as you know, I've known many heads of state, and they don't. I came to the conclusion that what Trump said showed that he was a human being. Politicians, I think, are groomed, and you are basically told you don't think about the people that die on the battlefield. That's just collateral damage. We have to win. So you've never heard any other head of state ever talk about the people that die. Um, I was good friends with Maggie Thatcher. I never heard her say anything like that. It's we got to win. This is it. You know, it's our territory. You're fighting over territory, not people. You know, Zelensky's outlawed the Russian language, outlawed their religion. Okay, so what are you fighting for? Let's say Zelensky won and took the Donbass. Then what? You can't speak Russian and you have to surrender your religion? This is democracy? What the hell are we fighting for? You know, it's there's so many contradictions in everything. It's ridiculous.
Will the United States keep sending money then?
I think that will be cut off. I've been arguing, and I've said on a couple other podcasts, I thought they would think I was a conspiracy theorist. I said, look, we have to, you know, not just cut off the money, we have to exit NATO. I said they're going to create a false flag to invoke Article 5 to get us into war. And I thought they would think I was crazy, and they said, no, we know you're right. I was like, wow, we've taken a step forward now. I think we have a reasonable shot that Trump will cut off the funds. You're going to have an awful lot of people calling him a traitor, this, that, the other thing. So it might be, you know, the press is going to be all pro-war. They always are. And anything that Trump does, they have to hate. So if he said the sky's blue, no, he's lying. It's red. You know, it's just the way they are. But look, even when I was in high school, they taught that it was the press that created the Spanish-American War. It was Pulitzer and Hearst. And Hearst even had, you know, telexes that surfaced that said, you give me the pictures and I'll create the war. I mean, this is what the press does all the time. CNN would love a war. They think their ratings will come back. Every one of them, all they do is pitch war. Even Fox.
I want to shift to domestically and get your thoughts on the mobilization of the National Guard that's started. It's already happened in D.C. and now it appears that Chicago might be imminent, New York City, and potentially Los Angeles. And you know, what do you think when you hear that?
I know a lot of people think, oh, that's like government. Look, those cities are out of control. I certainly would not go to Chicago anymore. Even LA. I mean, they've been overrun with illegal aliens, and they don't care. I've spoken to people from Chicago. They sent up these centers for all these illegal aliens. The illegal aliens didn't want the vaccines, and they said, "Oh, okay, fine, you're the exception." We had to do it, otherwise we lose our job, but they were not. Look, we'll see. But I mean, I understand. I've gotten emails from DC, and they said about time. I can now walk the streets where I couldn't before.
Do you ever think like maybe the United States is on the brink of some type of economic collapse, and maybe that's more the reason why this is occurring? Because I have a hard time believing this is to restore law, because once they leave, these local officials are not going to be like, oh, thank you for helping us, let's take it back and get things back to the way they were.
No, he's actually going after most of the illegal alien stuff. I know a lot of people keep saying, oh, the dollar's going to crash, Look, all they look at is domestic stuff. They do not look outside this country. Um, the dollar is the reserve currency. 1/3 of all consumer spending in the entire world, all right, comes from America. BMW needs to sell its cars. Toyota needs to sell its cars to Americans. All right, you can't price it in Bitcoin or pesos or something else. I mean, it's got to be dollars. All right. Um, the whole idea of, oh gee, we don't manufacture anything. Take a look. Why? You raise taxes so much on these areas that they left. It wasn't that I'm going to pay this guy $2 an hour versus $5. Just look at the taxes. The city of Detroit raised the taxes so many times. They defaulted in 1937. All right, that was they thought the economy would never end. That they were going to make all this money forever from auto manufacture. They began to leave. Historically, you can look at the 13th century, the city of Mainz, all right? Same exact outcome. That's where Gutenberg Press was. They thought this would be fantastic. Everybody was coming here. This was going to be where books were made, etc. Raised taxes. Guess what? They borrowed the same as these cities. They couldn't pay. When they couldn't pay because they raised taxes so much, people left. When the rich left, they couldn't pay the debt. What happened? They defaulted. Even the Pope excommunicated all the politicians, and the creditors invaded and sacked the city. I mean, human nature doesn't change. Detroit, wanted to say, oh, well, we didn't actually default. They suspended in 1937. You know when they finally repaid their debt? 1963. With cheaper dollars than they could afford to. I mean, this is the way it is. The United States is the strongest economy in the world. The dollar is the reserve currency also because we have never canceled the currency. Look it up. If you got a 20-pound note from Britain from just like 10 years ago, it's canceled. Switzerland canceled all its currency routinely. All right, Canada canceled all its high denomination notes. They canceled them. All right, Europe is going to cancel its currency. Why do they do this? Let's say you got 100,000 stashed in the safety deposit box. Now they cancel the currency. You're forced to come out with it. Okay? Oh, where'd you get this? Did you pay your taxes? This is what they do. They're Marxists. All right? Europe is pushing for their CBDCs ASAP. They will then cancel the currency. All right? You just had Spain put out that you can't take more than 3,000 euros out of your account without government permission. This is what's going on. I mean, they will cancel the currency.
You don't see that happening in the United States, so you don't see capital controls. No. Capital controls, though, or
Trump is actually moving in the opposite direction. Trump is proposing that we issue $500 bills again. Why? Mainly because 70%, if not more, of paper dollars are outside the United States. They are used everywhere because they know they can trust it. It's not going to be canceled. India canceled its high denomination notes. I still have some in my. I always kept some currency for I'm traveling around. I've got some from there. They canceled them. Okay, just frame them up. That's about it. Trump has come out and said no CBDCs, and so does the Fed. But that's constitutionally. The Fed cannot create a CBDC because it would have to issue a search warrant to look at your account. This is why they're allowing the banks to issue stable coins. But these stable coins are war bonds. You can look it up. Basically, in 1863, they issued treasury notes. All right, they allowed these banks, national notes, they allowed the banks to issue currency against the bonds that they bought, up to 90%. So you'll see all these different banks that issued currency. You can buy them. Some are very rare, some are more common. Stable coins are the same thing. You can issue the stable coins backed by debt. That's how they funded the Civil War. They got the banks to buy the debt, and you can issue the currency against it, so it's not deflationary. All right, so you're issuing these stable coins, and I've seen some Bitcoin people say, "Oh, see, this is validating." Do you understand what's going on? Backed by debt, the government debt. Hello, where is this independent or all this other kind of nonsense? They're war bonds. Because in the Biden administration, you had Blinken, who was, in my opinion, he had zero understanding of the world economy. He put the sanctions on Russia, removing them from SWIFT. That was the biggest red flag ever. And then that's what created BRICS. It had nothing to do with the dollar back. This is no nonsense. It was geopolitical. He then threatened China. If you help Russia, we can do the same to you. Hello, you idiot. You want to wage war? They own 10% of your debt. You're going to have to sell debt to wage war. Who's going to buy it? That's why they're turning to stable coins. China's been dumping 50 billion at a clip. That's why they created BRICS. All right, it was geopolitical. I mean, it will never replace the dollar, mainly because they don't have enough of a consumer-based economy to support it. China's trying. China has looked at the two economic models of the United States and Europe. Europe is still using the old mercantile models from, the 18th century. We sell stuff, bring gold back here. That makes us strong. All right. But they suppress their own people. So that's why look at the consumer spending of Europe is less than 10% of the world. All right. We're a third. That's why the United States, everybody had to sell their debt here. You can go on eBay and buy bonds before World War I, and you'll see China issued bonds in British pounds. Why? Because that was the financial capital. You wanted to sell it, you had to issue it in bonds. What do emerging markets do today? Look it up. They're issued in dollars. All right, so what makes the dollar the reserve currency? It's got nothing to do with the Federal Reserve or anything else. All you want to do an IPO, you go to New York. New York banks are the biggest in the world for that market. The IPO of Home Depot by itself was more than almost all the IPOs of Europe combined. I mean, it's people don't look at this, but they issue, in order for BRICS to beat the dollar, you need a financial market. Who's going to lend to all these IPOs? India? Brazil? Russia? Good luck. I mean, not going to happen. China will eventually come around. Our computer shows it will eventually beat the United States, but that's after 2032.
So do you see the United States going into some type of recession, depression in the short term?
We're in a recession, yes. Um, uh, Europe will go into a depression. I mean, it's nice Trump will do the tariffs and everything else. He'll probably end up being blamed for it, but you can't sell something to somebody that's declining. Simple as that. They're not going to be buyers because they're going into war. Go into war, they're not going to be spending. People save. So I wouldn't count on selling anything to Europeans much. And in Asia, you'll probably see the same thing. I mean, look, when our computer's forecasting war, world war, it's not just Russia versus Ukraine. You see it in the Middle East, India, Pakistan. It's everywhere. All right, Thailand, Cambodia, North versus South Korea, Taiwan. You got Russia ships in the Sea of Japan, and the Japanese are flexing their muscles. I mean, it's everywhere. The disputes in the Balkans are just legendary. You have, I've said before, but we gave a handful of jets to Greece, and look it up. What did they say? Made the front pages of the newspaper. Oh, now we can attack Turkey in a sneak attack. It's another NATO country. Turkey, they want to resurrect the Ottoman Empire.
They could very well exit exit NATO also.
Yeah, look, they probably would. I doubt seriously that you're looking at Turkey wanting to go to war against Russia. For what? What are they getting out of this? Estonia, Poland, the people that are running those operations there. Kalis, I mean, she belongs in a cell with Zelensky. I mean, she's openly come out and said, not only are they not going to support Trump, but she's openly come out and said that Russia's too big and should be broken up. I mean, these people are prejudiced, and they hate Russians for what Stalin did. You're blaming, the last generation for this one. And so they refuse to let go. All right, they let go with Germany. All right, they didn't hate Germans because of Hitler, but this generation's got to pass. I had arguments with the Ukrainians. Oh, it was the Russians that stole our food. I said, sorry. Okay, first of all, Stalin was from Georgia. Second of all, his right-hand man who did it was Kaganovich. He was Jewish and he was born in Kiev. And it was retribution because the Ukrainians were killing the Jews. All right. I mean, even the New York Times had it on the front page, when genocide is caught on film. Look it up. There's a Jewish woman. They're shooting her in the head. There's a pit, and she's holding the hand of her son. They don't shoot the son because they don't want to waste bullets. So they kill the mother, throw her in there, and they throw the little kid in there to be buried alive. This was Ukraine. Look it up. Even the Germans were shocked by the Ukrainian horrors. They would cut babies out of pregnant women, sew in a cat or glass, a live cat. I mean, this is all documented. It's like, you know, it's from a horror movie.
I know we're getting to the end here. I did want to bring up the fact that your conference that you're having at the end of the year, the 2025 World Economic Conference, and obviously, if you want to talk about that and what people can expect, and
well, it's actually our 40th conference. Our first one was 1985.
40th one. So what were you? You were 5 years old when you started it?
Well, I'm 75 now. I know I don't look it, but it's Reagan and I had basically our families came from the same area, so people used to think, he never got gray hair either. So just the way it is, but I think that look, we're going to be dealing with war, all the world economy, real estate. Everybody wants to know about real estate, and they want to know how do I go? And so we're going to be handling pretty much all those questions. We have a war cycle that's coming up for 2026, but the volatility in war should start to escalate from September on. As I said, I don't see, and I've warned this to Washington, that I don't see peace coming, and Europe is going to stab the United States in the back. They need war. They will not economically reform, because then they would have to give up some power. I mean, if you look at the design of the EU, it was purposely designed to eliminate democracy. You got Ursula, Google her. She's never even stood for any kind of election ever, not even a dog catcher. These people are appointed. The commission who makes the laws, they're appointed. Nobody stands for election. You get to elect a minister for parliament. Parliament has no authority to even write a law. This is democracy. Everybody I speak to in Europe, 3 years ago, it was like, you really think the EU is going to break up? Now I get, when? We've had enough. This is all I get now.
So people can go to the website to register for it?
Yeah, go to armstrongeconomics.com. In person, we have in Orlando, they're kind of like a mini UN, people flying in from all over the place. You get to meet a whole bunch of different people. But we also are streaming it to like 37 countries. So, I mean, last year I think we had more than 100,000 people online. So that's like Nigel Farage says, we're the alternative to Davos.
And it's November 21st to the 23rd for people looking to attend. So you have the option of going or doing it online.
Yes.
Martin, where else can people find you? Armstrong Economics, anywhere else?
I think we're on X. I think it's Strong Economics. We're a bunch of different places, but I don't even know them all. It's not my job,
It's social media. Well, you're on Instagram too. Same thing, Armstrong Economics on Instagram, on X, and the website. So I encourage everybody to, if they don't know Martin yet, to follow the work that he's doing, the information he's putting out. And if you are able to, go to the conference in November, or in worst case, sign up to watch it online.
Well, I think that's going to be interesting advice. I don't know how many more years I'm going to be able to do this.
Well, as always, I appreciate you making time for me, and I look forward to continuing to follow your work and more conversations ahead.
Well, good luck out there. Take care. We certainly do live in interesting times.
Yes, we do. Mic drop.